Hey guys, my name is KOKOStern and welcome to Biased Beginnings for Path of Exile. So I want to talk today about this game, and I've actually wanted to do Biased Beginnings for a while, but I wasn't really sure if I should or when I should, because it's hard to gauge really how much is the beginning of this game because I'm not fully familiar with it yet, and how far endgame goes. The additional problem is that it's an open beta and there's a lot of issues to discuss, really. But I do want to talk about this game, and I think now is as good a time as any. So we're actually going to start, and the first thing that we want to discuss and really put out, because we have to at this point, is to say what an action RPG is. So this game is an action RPG. What does that mean, really? So we have two things. We have the action and we have the RPG. Now, an RPG to me means that you have some sort of decisions and that they matter. They have consequences and ramifications, and they're not easily changed. Now, action means that you right-click and then stuff die. That's pretty much it, in most cases. So we have pure action games such as Devil May Cry or God of War, let's say, the big ones. And in those cases, you just hit stuff and that's about it. It's not an RPG because you don't decide anything. You just go down a pretty linear path and that's about it. You do have unlocks and points, but it's not really a decision. Now, when I say action RPG, most people will automatically go to Diablo 2. So you have HP and you have mana and you have potions that immediately heal you up if you die, and you have a skill tree and you choose skills, and there's items and there's prefixes and suffixes, normal items, magical items with a bit of prefixes and suffixes, and rare items with a ton of them. Sometimes there's set items, which if you have more than one, they give you additional bonuses, and there's legendary items with very, very specific things. That's about the basics of it, and there's also repetition. Well, additional gameplay comes from more difficulty levels, so you finish normal on level 30, and then you go into, say, the next difficulty level, let's call it Nightmare in D2 fashion, and then everything, you start from the beginning of the game in terms of the story and the content, but everything is higher leveled and more difficult to kill, so your level and equipment that you've gained matters. So that's the basic staple. That's an action RPG. The thing is, we're now, Diablo 2, I think Lord of Destruction, which is the expansion, came out at 2000, if I'm not wrong, and we're 13 years after that, so we need some innovation, we need something new. And if we look at the big ones that come out, the big ones that exist right now, it's pretty much Diablo 3 and Path of Exile. Now, I don't want to get into this too much. I don't want to get into this comparison because a comparison between any two similar games is stupid and endless and procs a discussion that will never end. So we're not really going to do this, but we have to talk a little bit about it. So please excuse me, but I have to do this. So like we said, that's the basics is basically action and RPG. You need to have decisions that matter. You need to build a character. That's what it means in terms of when you combine it with the action. And action means you kill stuff. So Diablo 3 went in a specific way, and Path of Exile is going in another. Now, Diablo 3 to me isn't actually an action RPG. It's just an action game, and I'll explain myself. See, in Diablo 3, you don't actually have choices. You only have action. So what you do is unlock things as you go along. When I level up, I don't decide anything, I unlock an additional skill. And obviously I can play around with whatever skills I'm using currently, but I'm not building my character in any way. It's unlocked. And in that way it's similar to pure action games such as DMC and God of War, where I do a bit of story and then I unlock something and then I can use it. And that's pretty much what Diablo does. There's no decisions whatsoever. And that's why I don't really like calling Diablo 3 an action RPG, because it's not an RPG, it's just action. Now, God of War. Path of Exile goes in a different route. And here, it really, really does the RPG thing in a really, really good way. And the way it does it is this giant thing. which is the passive skill tree. That's really, really, really freaking scary at first. It looks incredibly daunting. It is for the beginner, and I'm a beginner, so I'm not really, I don't know exactly what I'm doing here, but I'm trying. The thing is that this is the passive skill tree, and this is where we start talking about all the systems in this game. So, the first one, again, the most important one to me, is the fact that you have this passive skill grid, really, and the choices that you make matter. And the way it is, when I level up, I get a skill point, and then I can allocate it. As you can see, there's 1,000 or so. I believe the actual number is above 1,000. I'm not entirely sure, but it's irrelevant. There's more than 1,000, and the maximum level should be about 100. Adding up the passive points that you get, the passive skill points that you get from quests, you do have a couple of those. There's supposedly 111 points that you can allocate. Now, as the game is right now, you can safely get to about level 80 if you grind a lot. More realistically, it's about 60 or 70. And, you're not going to be doing everything, and you have to plan ahead. Now, notice I do have respec points, so you can respec it, but most of these, 100% of these, actually came in from quests. From quests, like I get passive points, quest rewards are also respec points. There are items, in fact, in the game, I'll actually show you them. There's actually items that allow you to respec, but those are very, very rare, and it's not realistic to think about respecing your entire character. So think about it. It's not exactly true, and I'm not going to argue with anyone about this because it's a bit irrelevant, but think about the following comparison. Think about getting 70 of the exact, let's say, legendary item in any game that has different item types, such as any RPG, pretty much. 70 of a very specific one. To reallocate 70 skill points. Not realistic, is it? And it really isn't, and it's not going to happen. Hold on, it's right here. Orb of Regret grants a passive skill refund point. So potentially you can do this, but you should plan ahead, and you should know what you're doing, and that's about it. And that's the choices that you make. You build your own character. Now, the way that the skill tree works is that you notice you have 6 starting locations. These are actually the classes. When you level up, you get a skill point. You also get a bit of HP and mana, but basically you get a skill point. And the classes, the difference between them, we haven't touched upon active skills yet, but we'll get there. The basic differences between each class is where you start. Notice that I started here, I'm a Templar. Now there are 3 basic attributes. There's Strength, red, Agility, which is, Dexterity, which is green, and Intelligence, which is blue. Now you have the 3 pure classes, supposedly. So this is where the Marauder starts, which is pure strength. You have the Ranger, which is pure agility, starts over here. This area is of the Witch, which is pure intelligence. And then you have the 3, you'd say, combos or hybrid classes, such as the Templar, which is intelligence and strength. You have the Duelist, which is strength and agility. Dexterity. Damn, I keep saying agility. And there's the Shadow, which is intelligence and dexterity, which starts over here. And other than the starting location, it means absolutely nothing. I mean, I can actually go, as you can see, I can go all the way across and do whatever the hell I want. But I have a set amount of points, and I gain 1 every level. So you really, really have to plan ahead here. Now, this tree is really great, and it's really thought of. And there's a lot of things, and there's tons of builds that you can actually do. Obviously, your class dictates a little bit because it's where you start, but you can deviate. I mean, I have seen Templar builds that go all the way into the Ranger territory, which is the other freaking side of the tree. But you can get there if you have enough points and if you plan accordingly. There's the very basic ones that just give you bonus to your attribute, and there's very, very specific ones that have a certain bonus, give you something good, and give you something bad. So they're really, what's the word I'm looking for here is they create builds, really. They define specific builds. As an example, I took Resolute Technique. Your hits can't be evaded, but you never deal critical strikes. So it's something very, very specific. And there's a lot of these keynodes, at the edges, really. So you have to really get there, and they define your build. So this is the huge, daunting skill tree that you get really fast familiarized with. You familiarize it really fast, is what I'm trying to say. And it's not that scary, eventually. So this is what makes this game an RPG, to me. And the action makes it action-y. But other than this, we also have all the other systems. And remember, like we said at the beginning, action RPG, you have the staples, you have the basic, but everything is up for grabs. And this game really does it in every single way. So we talked about prefixes and suffixes, which is just stuff that give you different attributes to your things. They went crazy here. There's everything. I mean, the flasks that you're using, the potions that we're used to, have prefixes and suffixes. Let's talk a little bit about the potion system. The way it works is that you have the basic ones, and they have a certain amount of charges, and you consume these charges. So I'm using this flask once, I'm going to get 300 mana over 7 seconds, and I consume 20 charges when I use it. So straight up, I can use it twice because it has 40. The thing is, how do you regain these charges? By killing enemies. So this creates an interesting dynamic where I'm using my flasks, they go up, using my flasks, go up. And say when I fight a boss, I have my flasks, but unless there's minions that I kill, the boss is problematic because I'm using up my flasks and I'm not killing anything. Remember, only when I kill something do I regain flask charges, so I really need the minions as well. It's a really interesting mechanic, and the thing is that it goes beyond that. There's not just mana and life. There's also, let's say, the Quicksilver Flask, which gives me increased movement speed. There's also resistances and defenses and all types of other flasks. And remember, each one of them can also be a special flask, a magical flask. So there's so much to do here. In addition to that, what other systems do we have here is, well, the basic thing, skill gems. So we talked about passives, right? But what about active skills? So the active skills come in form of skill gems. So we have sockets. We know sockets from Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, from general action RPGs. There's a socket that you can improve an item. But here, everything pretty much has a socket. And there's 3 types. There's 3 types of gems, which are strength. Well, there's generally 3 types of gems. Not exactly true, but gems could be affiliated with each one of the attributes. So there's strength gems, which are red, and green gems, which are dexterity, not agility, and there are intelligence gems, which are blue. So obviously I'm going to be able to use more strength and intelligence gems since I'm a Templar, and that's pretty much what I'm going for. I have a ton of strength. My specific build has a ton of strength and a bit less intelligence, so I'm mainly using red, as you can see. Obviously, it's possible to do pretty much whatever you want with proper items and customization, but that's the general way it goes. Also, items, an important thing to note, items also go according to your attributes. So everything, your attributes pretty much define your character in a lot of ways, along with the passive skill tree. So, again, skill gems. We have the basic ones, which just give you a skill, such as Lightning Strike. So I'm just going to use Lightning Strike. And that's just the skill. The thing is, you also have support gems that do different things and change up the skill. So I have my Lightning Strike. With it, I have a support fork. And what fork does is projectiles basically fork. So when it hits an enemy, it forks into more projectiles. I also have weapon elemental damage, which just increases the damage, and added fire damage, which just adds fire damage to my Lightning Strike. So obviously these things also, there's a mana cost multiplier, so it costs more mana. It's not just simple as that. And so my skill costs a bit of mana, but does all kinds of special effects, which are pretty cool and that diversify the skill. This allows you to have a finite amount of skills, of normal skills, and a finite amount of support gems, but a ton of combinations between them, which lets you further change up and customize your character, which is really, really lovely. And again, remember, everything has prefixes and suffixes. There's also, actually, I want to show you, there's also quality. So everything, pretty much every item can have upgraded quality up to 20%. So even gems have quality, which makes it better in a very specific way. But there's quality for everything, which is another thing other than prefixes and suffixes. Now, another really, really cool system that they implemented, they removed gold. There's no gold in this game. There's only currency items. And this creates a really interesting dynamic with pretty much everything. It ties into crafting and creating your own items. And in this game, since there's no auction house, it ties in really, really well to crafting and creates a really interesting system of crafting. So what currency items essentially do is deal with crafting and the basics of the game. So you obviously get an item that's magical, it's unidentified, and you need to identify it. That's the basic thing. It's a scroll of wisdom. You also have a portal scroll that sends you back to town, D2 style. The thing is, these are really the basics. Everything else that you see here does something very specific, and they're also a bit rarer the better they get. So, like we said, there's quality, so I have a blacksmith wheatstone, which improves the quality of a weapon. I also have an armorer's scrap, which improves the quality of an armor. There's also a gem cutter's prism, which improves the quality of a gem. And you can see the pattern here. There's improved quality of pretty much everything. In addition, there's also prefixes and suffixes games, and magical items and rare item games. So there is reforge a magic item with new random properties, or maybe upgrade a normal item into a rare item. There's also upgrade a magic item into a rare item, and there's also upgrade a normal item to a random rarity. There's so many options. I actually don't have one of each type. I believe there's a couple of ones that are so rare that I don't actually have them. Remember, I'm just starting out the game. This is actually my second or third character that I'm really playing with. So there's so much to do, and obviously the sockets as well. There's different sockets and different links between sockets which allow you to use support gems. So there's reforges the number of sockets, and there's reforge the color of sockets. There's so many things, a lot of randomization, and all of this allows you to customize so much. And there's really so much you could do here. Now, with all that said, with all these wonderful systems, that there's a ton to talk about. We haven't really covered everything. There are problems, and so far they've been doing a wonderful job, and I really hope that they keep this game in beta. And yes, it is an open beta, so you can play it. It's completely free to play, but it's beta. So there are a lot of issues. Now, everything pretty much, except for the music, which is wonderful, needs work on. Everything needs work on. Every little system, especially, let's say, this giant thing that pretty much requires you to balance it a lot, and it's the bigger it is, the harder it is, and it's huge. So as a personal example, my first character was a duelist. It starts out here, and it seems to be, after a lot of researching online and actually checking out the tree myself, Duelist is probably the most underpowered character at the moment because of lots of various reasons that we won't discuss here. But my first character is having a lot of trouble in the later stages of the game. So I started up a new one, which is a Templar, which seems to be really, really strong. So there's a ton to do. There's a lot to balance in this sense. A lot of other things need a lot of work as well. They need to balance currency items and drop rates and the content itself. There's a ton of content. They also have a lot of smart ideas in terms of the endgame content. There's actually maps, which is very specific maps with very specific attributes. Those are items too that you can actually upgrade. I don't have one, but I have a cartographer's chisel, which improves the quality of a map. So every map is in the game is obviously randomly generated because that's staple, but you also have maps which, in addition to being randomly generated, also have very specific enemies or stats, like, say, your flasks are meaningless, or something to do with resistances of yourself or of the enemies, or all kinds of things that can really come into play. Remember, prefixes and suffixes, but for maps. So they really have a smart idea in terms of endgame content, but there's a lot to work on. They still need to add more fleshed out basic content. There's just 3 acts so far and 3 difficulty levels. And they also have about endgame right now. Remember, the supposed level limit is 100, but the content kind of stops at level 70 something. So people have only managed to get to about 80, 84, 85, 86, and you can't actually reach level 100. So there's a lot to work on. Remember, this is in beta, but the core mechanics of things is really, really wonderful. It's a very smart take on the action RPG genre. And, oh yeah, the skill gems also level up. I forgot to say that there's really so much to discuss. The skill gems themselves, they level up too. So when I'm doing a very specific thing, and I'm using specific skill gems, if I want to switch, I have to level them up. And obviously I have to find them because they're items as well. There's a ton of customizations, there's a ton to do. There's an interesting trading system where everything is barter, basically. So I'll give you this for that, and you have to talk to random people that you find, and you can team up to 6 players. There's so much to really talk about, and there's so many special, interesting ideas that you have to implement as well. I want to touch a little bit. We're actually going for 20 minutes, so I want to wrap up. One last thing that I want to say is talk about the leagues. So they have a really interesting idea about leagues. If you recall from Diablo 2 and from basic RPG, action RPG, there's the hardcore players. So if your character gets one death, when you die, your character goes away forever. So here, the way they did it is they built on top of that, and there are leagues. So the hardcore is basically a league. When you die in hardcore, you don't lose your character, which would suck. The character just passes on to the default league. So you don't want that to happen, but at least you don't lose the character. The thing is that it opens up a lot of other possibilities. Think about a league, a specific league, which is a race. Say 24 hours, the highest level, the one that manages to get to the highest level gets, let's say, actual prize money or in-game currency or whatever. That could mean a lot. There could be a lot of interesting things to do here. And a lot of interesting leagues, such as a really difficult league where there are no flasks, or maybe where flasks only recharge when you kill, not when you go to town. Because right now, if you go to town, your flask refill immediately. So there's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of smart ideas here. And the main problem that specifically I have with this is doing an afterthought. So I usually do a biased beginnings, which is starting up the game, and then an afterthought after I finish it. You can't finish a game such as this, really, and I don't know when it'll be a smart idea to do an afterthought. If you think about it, it's a really good game right now, and you can totally get into it, but the best time to get into it will be, say, when it actually comes out and it's actually fully ready and doesn't have any problems, which can be in 6 months or in a year. Right now, as an example, remember, it's a beta, so there are server crashes, which are really, really unfortunate, especially for hardcore people, because it can actually cause them to lose their character in hardcore and have it transferred to default. There's a lot of problems with this game. It is not perfect by any way, but the core mechanics are really wonderful. A really wonderful take, and a really successful take on action RPGs in the current age. And, ooh, superiors. And I really like it. I don't know when I'll do an afterthought. I'm gonna go kill more mobs and level up. And thank you very much for watching. This has been Biased Beginnings for Path of Exile. It is a free-to-play game. There are microtransactions for graphical things, but it's a free-to-play game, and you can play it right now. It's in open beta. It's called Path of Exile. My name has been KOKOStern, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching. See ya.